The sun that morning was not a friend. It was an enemy. It beat down on the earth until even the air burned in my lungs. On my head balanced a clay jar, heavy with the water my siblings needed to survive. Every step was a battle, every breath a reminder that failure was not an option. But then, fate placed a stranger in my path, and everything began to change. The marketplace shimmered under waves of heat, the dirt rising in choking clouds as I dragged my feet along the path. My body was frail from hunger, my lips cracked from thirst, but I forced myself onward. At home, in a crumbling hut, my 3 siblings waited for me. They were too young, too fragile to walk this road themselves, so the burden fell on me, always me. The clay jar cut into my scalp and shoulders. I imagined their faces, sunken cheeks, wide, hollow eyes, small hands reaching for me. If I faltered, if I spilled even a drop, their suffering would grow. The thought made my knees tremble, but I clenched my jaw and whispered to myself, "One more step, just one more." That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was the cry of an animal, low, weak, broken. My heart jumped, and I froze. Then I saw him. An old man, slumped by the roadside. His skin was blistered from the sun, his clothes in tatters. His lips were split, and his chest heaved in shallow breaths. His eyes, half closed, weary, lifted toward me, and his trembling hand reached out. "Water." His voice was a rasp, a fragile whisper. "Please, water." My body stiffened. The jar on my head suddenly felt heavier than stone. My heart screamed one truth: that water was not for him. It was for my siblings. Every drop was survival. Every sip meant life or death. Could I truly risk it on a stranger? I hesitated, torn apart inside. Logic told me to keep walking. Compassion told me to stop. My siblings' faces haunted me, but so did his. Then, for a brief moment, our eyes met. And in that gaze, I saw something I could not explain. Not just desperation, not just weakness, something deeper. A flicker of light buried beneath pain, something that felt almost fatherly. My chest tightened. My breath caught. Against all reason, I lowered the jar. My hands trembled as I untied the lid, the smell of cool water filling the air like a sacred promise. I cupped my palm, dipped it into the jar, and held it to his lips. He drank greedily at first, then slowly, his body trembling with relief as though life itself had poured back into him. Tears stung my eyes. His frail hand gripped my wrist, not with strength, but with gratitude. "Bless you, child," he whispered, voice breaking. The words struck me like thunder. No one had called me a blessing in years. To the villagers I was cursed, unlucky, a burden dragging her siblings into ruin. But to this dying man, I was salvation. I gave him one more sip, then pulled the jar away, fearful of giving too much. My siblings still waited. I had to protect them. For a long moment, he just looked at me. His lips trembled, his eyes glistened, and in that silence, I felt a bond I could not understand. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand and leaned back against the tree. "I must go," I whispered, lifting the jar back onto my head. He said nothing, only watched me with that strange, searching gaze, as though memorizing my face. I turned away and walked on, but each step felt heavier than the last. The jar pressed down harder, my knees wobbled, and my heart churned with guilt. Had I done the right thing? Had I stolen life from my siblings to give it to a stranger? Or had I done something greater, something beyond survival? That night, as I poured the water into wooden bowls for my siblings, I watched their small hands clutch the cups, their lips trembling as they drank. Relief washed over me. There was enough. They would not go thirsty tonight. But as the fire crackled weakly in the corner of the hut, my thoughts returned to the old man, his cracked lips, his trembling voice, his eyes that seemed to carry secrets. Why couldn't I forget him? Why did his gratitude weigh so heavily on my heart? I lay awake long after my siblings fell asleep, their soft breaths filling the darkness. The jar sat empty beside me. I closed my eyes, but the memory of his gaze burned behind my eyelids. It was not the look of a stranger. It was the look of someone who had found something unexpected, something important. And though I told myself it had been nothing, just a fleeting act of kindness, a voice inside me whispered otherwise. That day was not chance. It was the beginning of something I could not yet see. I thought I had simply quenched the thirst of a dying man. I thought it was a small act, one that would fade with the setting sun. But I was wrong. Fate had paused that day, waiting for me to make a choice. And soon, I would learn the man I had helped was not who he seemed at all. The night after I gave that stranger my family's water, I lay awake in the darkness of our crumbling hut. My siblings slept beside me, their thin bodies curled like paper, their breaths shallow from hunger. Every drop of water I had carried home felt heavier than stone, as if guilt itself had seeped into the jar. I told myself I had saved a life. But what if, in doing so, I had endangered the only lives that truly depended on me? Home was no palace. It was a test of endurance. Our hut leaned like a tired old man, its mud walls cracked, its thatched roof barely clinging together. The wind whistled through holes in the walls, the cold seeping into our bones each night. The floor was bare earth, hard and unforgiving, where my siblings slept in a pile for warmth. Every day was a war against hunger. We counted grains of rice as if they were gold, stretching crumbs of bread to feed mouths that never seemed to stop aching. My siblings' ribs showed through their skin, their eyes wide and hollow, and each time I looked at them, my heart tore a little more. I was not just their sister anymore. I was their mother, their father, their shield against a world that seemed determined to break us. At night, when hunger gnawed too loudly for sleep, I told them stories. Stories I made up, painting pictures of places where no one went thirsty, where rivers flowed endlessly, where children ran free without fear of hunger or cold. My siblings would smile faintly, their eyes closing as dreams carried them away. But when the silence returned, I curled in the corner, biting my fist to smother my own sobs. The neighbors knew our suffering, yet their hearts stayed shut. Some whispered pity as they passed, but pity never filled a belly. Others mocked us openly, their voices dripping with cruelty. "They won't last the season," I heard one woman say. "That girl is too weak to save them." Their words burned hotter than the sun, but what cut deepest was the thought that maybe they were right. And still my mind returned to the man at the roadside, his cracked lips, his trembling hand, his whisper of gratitude. I had saved him with water, but had I stolen survival from my siblings to do it? The question circled me like a vulture, refusing to let me rest. Each morning, I walked to the market well, the clay jar balanced on my head. The line was long, women with sharp eyes guarding every drop, men shouting prices for scraps of grain. The air was thick with dust, the smell of sweat, and the sound of desperate bargaining. Every step closer to the well was a battle, every pull of the rope a reminder that water was not a gift. It was life. I held that jar as though it were the most precious treasure in the world, because for us, it was. If it slipped, if it cracked, we were lost. And every time I lifted it from the well, I thought of him. Was he alive because of me? Was he waiting somewhere, still weak and thirsty? My heart told me yes. Meanwhile, hunger grew sharper at home. My siblings often fought over scraps, their small voices rising in desperation. I gave them my share in silence, smiling even as my stomach twisted in pain. My body grew weaker each day, my strength fading, but I could not let them see it. They needed hope, and if I crumbled, the fragile thread holding us together would snap. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of red and gold, I caught my reflection in a broken shard of pottery. The girl staring back at me looked like a stranger, her cheeks hollow, her eyes sunken, her hair dull and tangled. For a moment, fear gripped me. Would I vanish too, like my parents? Would my siblings one day wake to find me gone? I clenched my fists. No, I could not allow that. I had to endure, no matter the cost. But fate has its own way of testing vows. Days later, I returned to the market well, the jar once again pressing against my weary shoulders. The crowd bustled as always, dust swirling, voices shouting. Yet my heart froze. Among the chaos, I felt it, eyes watching me. And then I saw him, standing not far from the well. The same man I had given water to, alive, waiting, and looking directly at me. The first time I noticed him again, the marketplace around me dissolved into noise and dust, but his eyes cut through it all. They didn't pity me like the villagers did. They didn't sneer like the neighbors did. His gaze was sharper, heavier, as if he was peeling back the layers of my skin to see the pain I tried so hard to hide. In that moment, I knew. This was no ordinary stranger. I froze when our eyes met. The same man I had given water to days earlier now stood at the market well. He looked stronger than before, though still leaning on his stick. His clothes were no finer than rags, yet there was a dignity in the way he carried himself. The memory of his trembling lips whispering, "Bless you, child," came rushing back, and for a heartbeat, I forgot the jar of water pressing into my shoulders. But why was he here? Why was he watching me? I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was a coincidence. The market was crowded. Strangers passed through all the time. But the next day, he was there again. And the day after that. Always in the same place. Always watching me. When I filled my jar at the well, his gaze followed me. When I bent down to gather firewood, I caught him lingering in the distance. At first, fear gripped me. Had I invited danger into my life by helping him? But fear soon gave way to something else, a strange curiosity. Finally, one afternoon, he stepped closer. His steps were slow, deliberate, each one steady despite the tremor in his frame. He stopped just in front of me, his eyes locking onto mine. "What is your name?" he asked softly. The question startled me. I clutched the jar tighter, my lips parting before I could stop them. I told him my name in a whisper. "And your family?" he asked. "Who cares for you?" The words pierced straight into me. Nobody had ever asked me that, not with sincerity. The villagers only whispered about us behind our backs. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to answer. "I do. I care for them. My brothers and sister. There is no one else." For a long moment he was silent. His eyes, heavy with something I couldn't name, rested on me as though he was carrying my pain. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The next day, he returned again. This time, he didn't ask questions. Instead, he placed a small loaf of bread on the ground beside me. I stared at it in shock. Bread was rare for us, a treasure we could hardly afford. My stomach growled at the sight, but my pride recoiled. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. Still that night, I carried the bread home and shared it with my siblings. Their faces lit up as they tore into the soft crust, laughter spilling into the cracks of our hut. I gave them my share too, lying that I had already eaten. From then on, the man became a quiet shadow in my days. Sometimes he appeared with dried fruit, sometimes with nothing but questions. He always asked about my siblings, about how we survived. He never mocked me, never looked at me with pity. His kindness was gentle, steady, and it unsettled me more than cruelty ever had. Because in my world, kindness was never free. One afternoon, as I returned from the forest with a bundle of sticks strapped to my back, he appeared again. Without asking, he lifted part of the load from my shoulders. Relief swept through my body, but suspicion flared in my mind. "Why are you helping me?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. "What do you want from me?" He stopped walking, leaning on his stick. His eyes glistened, heavy with grief. "I want nothing," he said softly. "But I see something in you, something I thought I had lost." His words shook me. What could he possibly see in me? I was nothing but a poor girl, worn down by hunger and responsibility. Yet the way he spoke made it feel as though I carried something precious, even if I couldn't see it myself. As days turned into weeks, my siblings began to notice him too. At first, they hid behind me whenever he came near, but he never forced their trust. Instead, he knelt to their level, telling them riddles and small stories that made them laugh. Their shy giggles soon turned into full laughter, filling our hut with a warmth I hadn't heard in years. At night, as they slept peacefully with crumbs still on their lips, I lay awake in the darkness. My heart battled itself. Part of me longed to trust him, to let his presence be the answer to prayers I had long since abandoned. But another part whispered warnings. Be careful. Nothing this good lasts forever. And so I hovered between suspicion and comfort, never fully trusting, never fully rejecting. Then one day, he broke the pattern. No bread, no questions, no small talk. Instead, he stood before me in the bustling market and said, "Come with me, beyond the crowd." My heart skipped a beat. Beyond the market? Beyond the safety of watching eyes? I felt fear and curiosity clash inside me, and I realized, whatever he was hiding, I was about to step into it. My feet refused to move. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to run home to my siblings waiting in hunger. And yet, something in his frail eyes pulled me forward like an invisible thread. The marketplace noise faded behind us, the shouts of traders, the cries of children, the clatter of baskets, until all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. He stopped before a towering wooden gate I had never noticed before, half hidden between crumbling mud walls. My chest tightened. What lay beyond those gates? Why was he leading me here, away from the eyes of the village? When the gate creaked open, my breath caught in my throat. I had expected darkness, another shadow of poverty. Instead, I stepped into a world I never imagined belonged in our village, one that looked more like a dream than reality. Inside, the courtyard glittered with life. Silks of crimson, sapphire, and gold swayed in the breeze like captured sunlight. The air was thick with the scent of spices, clove, cinnamon, pepper. So rich it almost drowned me. Baskets overflowed with fruits I had never dared to touch. Mangoes shining like jewels, bananas golden and ripe, pomegranates split open with ruby seeds spilling out. And in the center, a stone fountain poured fresh water, something I had only seen in the dreams I used to weave for my siblings. I froze at the threshold, clutching my rags tighter. My body screamed, "You don't belong here!" My siblings were waiting in a broken hut with nothing but hunger, while I stood in a place overflowing with plenty. He turned, his weak smile almost fatherly. "Come, child. This place is yours too, if you will let it be." My steps were small, unsure, as though the ground might collapse beneath me. My eyes drank in every detail, but my stomach tightened painfully when the smell of roasted meat reached me. He noticed. Without a word, he signaled to a boy, a servant, his feet bare but his eyes bright, who returned with a tray. On it sat rice steaming with spice, bread still warm from the oven, and thick stew fragrant with herbs. "Eat," the old man said softly. Tears burned my eyes. I hadn't eaten a full meal in months. My lips trembled. I can't," I whispered. "It's too much. I can't repay you." His voice grew gentle, yet strong. "Repayment is not always made with money. Sometimes it is made with truth. Eat first. Then tell me your truth." With shaking hands, I lifted the bread. The first bite nearly broke me. Warmth spread through me, chasing away weeks of hunger. I wanted to devour it all at once, but shame held me back, so I forced myself to eat slowly. Each taste was joy and pain at once. joy for my body, pain for the memory of my siblings still starving. When the last bite was gone, he leaned forward, his frail hands folded on the table. "Now," he said, his eyes steady. "Tell me, child, what do you dream of?" The question stunned me. My dreams? No one had ever asked. Dreams were luxuries for rich children, not for a girl who woke each day wondering if her siblings would survive another night. I lowered my gaze. "I don't dream," I whispered. But he waited, silent. His silence pressed on me harder than words ever could. Finally, the truth escaped me. "I dream only that my brothers and sister may eat enough to grow, that they might laugh without fear, that they might live a better life." My throat ached as I forced the words out. "I want nothing for myself, only them." Silence fell across the courtyard. He didn't laugh at me, didn't call me foolish. Instead, his eyes softened, wet with something like sorrow. His lips trembled. "You remind me," he said slowly, "of someone I once loved dearly." My chest tightened. "Who?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. But he didn't respond. His gaze lingered on me, as though he was seeing both me and someone else through my face. The air between us grew heavy, and my skin prickled as though the world was holding its breath. At last, he leaned closer, his voice low but unshakable. "You say you only dream of your siblings' better life." His eyes burned into mine, sharp with meaning. "Then, child, you must know who I am." My heart thundered as the world seemed to tilt beneath me. In that moment, I realized the old man I thought was just a frail stranger was about to reveal a truth that could change everything. The silence wrapped around me like a trap. My breath grew shallow as his trembling fingers pushed the untouched food aside. His back was bent, his clothes torn, his face lined with age. Yet in that moment, he no longer looked like a frail beggar. His eyes glowed with a fire that seemed too heavy for such a fragile body. And then, in a voice low but sharp enough to slice through my bones, he whispered the words that stopped my heart cold. "I am the Sultan of the market." For a heartbeat, I thought I had misheard him. My ears rang, my chest tightened, and I stared at him as though he had just spoken madness. Sultan? This old man who had begged for water, who had stumbled under a bundle of sticks heavier than his frame. Impossible. And yet his gaze did not waver. It burned into me with a truth that demanded to be believed. At first, laughter bubbled at the edge of my throat, half from disbelief, half from fear. You're joking," I whispered, clutching the edge of the table to steady myself. But his eyes, dark and endless, silenced me. "I wear these rags," he said, his voice trembling yet firm, "to know the hearts of men, to see who would offer kindness when there is no crown, no gold, no promise of reward." My mind spun. The spices, the silks, the treasures hidden in this courtyard, they were not the possessions of a poor wanderer. They were the remnants of power, concealed behind crumbling walls. And suddenly, everything fell into place. The way the guards at the edge of the market had looked at him with quiet respect, the way merchants' eyes had flickered nervously when he passed by in disguise. "You gave me water," he continued, his gaze fixed on me as though my soul itself was under trial. "When others turned away, you stopped. You shared what little you had, though you could not afford to. That gift told me more about you than any words ever could." I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came. My heart raced as memories flashed through my mind, the jar of water balanced on my head, his cracked lips whispering for help, my hesitation before bending to give him a sip. Could something so small truly matter? He leaned back, his frail hands clasped before him. "Compassion is rarer than gold. It cannot be bought. And in you, I saw it." Shock rippled through me. I felt anger rising too. Anger that he had hidden this from me. Anger that I had wasted nights worrying whether he was a danger, when in truth he was the man who ruled the market itself. "You tricked me," I said softly, my voice breaking between hurt and confusion. "Why? Why would a sultan pretend to be dying in the forest?" His eyes softened then, and for the first time I saw the loneliness behind his disguise. "Because wealth blinds people. When they see a sultan, they bow. When they see an old man, they look away. I needed to know if kindness still existed without power. And you, child, you showed me it does." Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to shout at him, to run from the weight of his truth, but at the same time, a strange warmth spread through me. Out of everyone, he had chosen me. The silence stretched between us, heavy and alive. Finally, he gestured toward the table where food still sat untouched. "Eat," he said softly. "No one here will take it from you. This is yours now." I obeyed, though my hands trembled as I lifted the bread. The taste was richer than anything I had known, but my throat tightened with every bite. This wasn't just food. It was the doorway to a world I had never imagined. When I finished, he studied me quietly, his wrinkled hands folded in his lap. "Tell me," he said at last, "what do you dream of?" The question pierced me. My dreams? Did I even have any? My life had been survival, one day to the next, one breath to the next, and yet, with his eyes fixed on me, I felt the words spilling out. "I don't want riches," I whispered. "I don't want palaces or treasures. I only want my brothers and sister to live better than this. I want them to laugh without fear. I want them to sleep without hunger gnawing at their stomachs. That is my dream." My voice cracked at the end, and I bit my lip to hold back tears. His face did not change, but his eyes glistened with something deep, sorrow, perhaps, or recognition. "You are stronger than you know," he murmured. "Stronger than even the richest of men." For a long time, he said nothing more. The night deepened outside, the stars beginning to shimmer faintly over the walls of the courtyard. The air was thick with spices and secrets, and I felt caught between two worlds, the world I had always known, and the world he was slowly revealing. Then he leaned closer. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of thunder. "You must know who I am," he said. "Not just a sultan, not just a man in rags. You must know why I have chosen you." My heart pounded so loud, it drowned out the night. His gaze locked on mine, unwavering, filled with something that felt both terrifying and tender. And then he spoke the words that made my breath vanish. "Would you let me care for you and your siblings?" he asked softly. The question hung in the air like a blade, sharp and heavy. My heart leapt into my throat, torn between fear and hope. Was this a trap, or a miracle I had prayed for all along? In that moment, I knew. My answer would change everything. My heart was split in two the moment his words echoed in the silence. "Would you let me care for you and your siblings?" For an instant, hope flared inside me like a spark in dry grass, bright, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. But almost as quickly, suspicion smothered it. I had learned too well that trust was a weapon people used to break you, and I could not risk my family on a promise I didn't yet understand. I shook my head slowly, my voice trembling. "I can't," I whispered. "I won't gamble with their lives. They're all I have. If I lose them, I lose everything." For a long time, he said nothing. I expected anger, maybe disappointment, maybe even mockery, because that's what the world had always given me when I dared to refuse its offers. But instead, he only nodded, his tired eyes filled with something that looked like understanding. "You are wise," he said softly. "Most would accept without question, but you love them too much to risk betrayal. That is strength, not weakness." His words startled me. No one had ever praised my caution before. To most people, my fear was an inconvenience, a burden, but to him, it was proof that I cared deeply, fiercely, enough to guard my siblings even against hope itself. Still, my refusal weighed heavy on me. That night, as I returned to the hut, my siblings rushed to meet me. Their hollow eyes lit up when I told them what had happened, about the food, the warmth, the strange courtyard behind the market gates. "Did he give us more?" my youngest asked eagerly, his small hands clutching at my dress. "No," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. He offered, but I said no. Their faces fell. Confusion flickered in their eyes, but they didn't argue. They trusted me, and that trust cut deeper than any blade. Because in my silence, I wondered, had I stolen from them the chance for a better life? The days that followed stretched long and heavy. Each morning I walked to the market with firewood on my back, and every step felt heavier than before. The whispers of the villagers clung to me like shadows. Why is she always near him? What game is she playing? Their voices burned my ears, feeding the fear that I had made the wrong choice. Yet at night, when my siblings huddled against me, their small bodies shivering, I reminded myself, safety first. Trust was a luxury we could not afford. And yet, his words would not leave me. I would never separate you. If I care for one, I must care for all. It was dangerous to believe them. But sometimes, when the hunger clawed too sharp, when the cough of my youngest brother rattled through the darkness, those words replayed in my mind, like a fragile song. Could he truly mean it? He didn't push me. That was what unsettled me most. Others who had offered help before always came with chains. Their kindness was loud, flashy, demanding gratitude, or repayment. But he disappeared back into his world of silks and shadows, leaving me with my refusal hanging between us like an unfinished sentence. Days passed. I thought perhaps he had grown tired of me, that he had walked away from the burden of a poor girl and her siblings. A part of me was relieved, but another part, one I didn't want to admit existed, felt the sting of disappointment. One evening, as I knelt outside our hut, breaking apart sticks too thin to burn, my youngest crawled into my lap. His voice was soft, fragile. "Sister, do you think tomorrow we will eat better food?" I froze. His question was innocent, but it sliced through me. I forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "Yes," I lied. "Tomorrow will be better." But inside, I broke, because I had no answer. That night, when they slept, I sat awake staring at the weak fire until tears blurred my vision. My refusal echoed in my ears. Was I protecting them? Or was I too afraid to grasp the miracle we needed most? The next morning, I returned to the market. The same noise, the same chaos, the same indifferent faces. I searched for him without meaning to, my eyes flicking to every shadow, every corner. But he was gone. And with his absence, I felt a strange emptiness I couldn't explain. For 3 days, the pattern continued. Work, hunger, silence. My siblings grew weaker, their laughter fading back into the dull quiet of survival. And I carried the weight of doubt heavier than the wood on my back. Then, on the 4th day, everything changed. I was returning home at dusk, the sun bleeding red across the horizon, when I froze at the sight of a figure standing near our broken hut. My heart leapt, then stumbled. It was him. But he wasn't empty-handed. In his arms were bundles wrapped in cloth, food, medicine, even folded clothes. My siblings ran to him instantly, their voices ringing with joy. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart slamming against my ribs, torn between relief and fear. Why had he come here, into my world of rags and shadows? What did this mean for us? As he stepped into our hut, laying food on the floor with gentle care, I realized the walls I had built around my heart were no longer enough. Gratitude and suspicion warred inside me, each fighting for control. My siblings clung to him, their laughter filling the air. And I, paralyzed in the doorway, knew this was the moment everything would change. because sometimes miracles do not wait for permission. They arrive at your door. I had grown so used to silence that laughter felt almost frightening when it returned. For years, our hut had echoed with nothing but coughs, sighs, and the hollow cries of hunger. But that day, as I pushed the broken door open, I froze in disbelief. My siblings were laughing, real laughter, unrestrained, ringing so loud it seemed to chase away the shadows clinging to our walls. And at the center of it all was him. The old man sat cross-legged on the dirt floor, his frail hands steady as he carved a small wooden horse. My youngest brother clapped with delight. My sister's giggles spilled like music, and my older brother leaned forward, eyes shining as though he had forgotten hunger altogether. For a moment my chest tightened. This wasn't the home I knew. It was the home I had prayed for in the dark, hopeless nights when no one seemed to hear. He came often after that, never with grandeur or boastfulness, but always with something that touched our lives. Sometimes it was bread still warm from the oven, sometimes dried fruits or honey, and sometimes it was nothing at all, just his presence, his stories, and his gentle laughter. He gave my siblings more than food. He gave them joy. He taught them riddles that made them collapse in giggles. He carved toys, horses, birds, and even a crooked little lion that my brother carried everywhere. At night, he told tales by the fire, his voice weaving stories of kingdoms, journeys, and hidden treasures. My siblings huddled close to him, their faces glowing with wonder, their laughter echoing against the wooden walls, like music. And me, I sat in the corner, my heart torn. Relief filled me each time I saw them smile, but fear whispered in my ear, "Nothing this good lasts. Don't trust too easily." The children began to call him grandfather. They said it with natural affection, the kind that doesn't need to be taught. And he never corrected them. Each time they said it, his eyes glistened with tears he tried to hide, as though the name itself healed an old wound. One evening, I returned from gathering wood to find him sitting outside with my sister on his lap. He was teaching her a rhyme, her small voice rising in cheerful mistakes, his frail laugh following after. I leaned against the doorway, watching them, my heart aching in ways I couldn't explain. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost forever: hope. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, he sat silently by the fire. The flames flickered across his face, carving shadows into the lines of his age. I joined him quietly, unsure whether to speak. Without looking at me, he whispered, "You remind me of her." I frowned. "Who?" "My daughter," he said softly. His voice cracked on the word. "She died young. Too young. I never got to see her grow into the woman she might have been. When I look at you, I see her stubbornness, her strength, even the kindness in her eyes." His words struck me like a blow. A lump rose in my throat, and I didn't know whether to comfort him or to pull away. I wasn't his daughter. I couldn't be. Yet in that moment, his grief was so raw it felt like it belonged in our home too. That night, I barely slept. His words lingered in my chest. I wondered if his affection was born out of who I was, or who I reminded him of. But when I looked at my siblings sleeping peacefully under warm blankets, their stomachs no longer empty, I couldn't deny the truth. He had given them more than food. He had given them a childhood again. Over the days that followed, his bond with us grew deeper. He worked alongside me, fetching water, gathering wood, showing me easier ways to manage the burdens I carried. My siblings clung to him, and in their laughter, our broken hut began to feel like a home again. But with love came fear. Every time I watched them call him grandfather, every time I saw the warmth in his eyes, I asked myself, what happens if we lose him too? What happens if this joy is stolen from us like everything else has been? Then came the evening that changed everything. The children had gone to bed early, tired from playing riddles and chasing one another around the hut. The fire crackled softly as the old man sat across from me, his hands folded on his lap, his face more serious than I had ever seen it. "There is something I must tell you," he said quietly. My chest tightened. His tone carried a weight that made my skin prickle. I waited, my heart pounding in the silence between us. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes glistened, filled with both sorrow and longing. His voice trembled as he spoke the words that made my breath falter. "You are more to me than a stranger. You are the daughter I never had the chance to raise." The words settled into me like stones, heavy and unshakable. I wanted to respond, to tell him I wasn't her, that I could never replace what he had lost. But my throat closed with tears. He took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving mine, and what he said next shattered the fragile silence of our hut. "My greatest wish," he whispered, voice trembling yet steady, "is to adopt you." The fire crackled between us, but its warmth didn't reach me. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. My siblings stirred in their sleep, unaware that their world was about to change forever. And I sat frozen, staring at him, realizing my life had just been turned upside down. The moment he said, "I want to adopt you," my heart stopped. For anyone else, those words might have sounded like rescue, a doorway out of hunger and fear. But to me, they struck like a blade. Adoption sounded like hope, yes, but it also felt like betrayal. My parents' faces flashed before my eyes, their voices echoing in the silence of my soul. If I said yes, would I be erasing them? If I said no, would I be stealing a future from my siblings? That night, I sat by the dim fire, with tears spilling silently down my face. My siblings slept peacefully beside me, their small bodies warm, their bellies full for the first time in weeks. I should have been grateful, relieved, but guilt gnawed at me like a starving beast. Could I really call another man father? Could I allow my siblings to call him what belonged to our own parents, who had given their lives for us? And yet, could I deny them the love, laughter, and safety they had so long been starved of? My soul was split down the middle, half chained to the memory of the past, half dragged toward the promise of the future. The days that followed tested me more than any hunger had. My siblings begged me with shining eyes. "Say yes, sister," my youngest pleaded, clutching at my hand. "He makes us laugh. He takes care of us. Isn't that what Papa would have wanted?" "He is kind," my sister whispered, "like Mama was." Their words shattered me. Each plea pulled me closer to a decision I wasn't ready to make. Their joy was undeniable, their love for him pure and innocent. But in my chest, my parents' memory screamed louder than my siblings' voices. At night, I prayed. I didn't know to whom anymore, God, fate, my parents, or just the empty sky, but I begged for an answer. Some nights, I cried myself to exhaustion, asking my mother to come to me in dreams. Other nights, I stared at the weak flames, my heart aching with the fear that whichever path I chose would wound someone I loved. The thought haunted me. Was I being selfish for clinging to the past, or was I being cowardly for refusing the future? Through it all, the old man never pressured me. He still came each day, carrying food, telling stories, making my siblings laugh until their ribs ached. He asked nothing of me. He never repeated his request. Instead, he gave me space to fight my battle alone. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the horizon, he sat beside me and spoke in a voice that carried more weight than any crown. "Family should be chosen freely," he said. "If you refuse, I will not love you less. If you accept, I will never leave you. But the choice must be yours. No one should be bound by force to love." His words trembled inside me. They were both terrifying and freeing. He had placed the decision in my hands, hands already trembling from the weight of too many burdens. That night, I dreamed of my mother. She stood in a field of light, her smile gentle, her hand reaching toward me. She did not speak, but her eyes told me what my heart already knew. "I want you to live. I want you to be happy." I woke with tears streaming down my face, uncertain if the dream was real or just the echo of my longing. But something inside me had shifted. Maybe accepting him didn't mean replacing them. Maybe it meant honoring them, by giving their children the life they had once prayed for. Days passed in restless silence, until finally, I knew I could no longer delay. I gathered my siblings in the hut one evening. They looked at me with expectant eyes, their little hands clutching mine. My throat tightened, my chest heaved, but I forced the words out through trembling lips. I think," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I think I'm ready." Their cheers filled the room, their arms wrapping around me with pure joy. And though fear still coiled in my stomach, hope began to rise, higher than doubt, for the first time. The next morning, I stood before him, my body trembling, my heart racing. His eyes met mine, calm, steady, as though he already knew the answer. My lips quivered as I leaned closer, the weight of my parents and the hope of my siblings pressing down on me. And then, with a voice barely louder than a breath, I whispered my decision. In that moment, I knew our lives would never be the same again. The first stone was not thrown by a hand. It was thrown by a whisper. It cut through the marketplace like a curse, sharp enough to pierce my heart. At first, I thought I imagined it. But then another voice joined in, and another, until the air itself buzzed with venom. Faces I had known all my life turned toward me, not with pity as before, but with suspicion and hatred. And in that moment I realized I was no longer invisible. I was the enemy. "She fooled him," one voice hissed near the spice stall. "She's clever. Too clever," another sneered. "Greedy orphan," someone spat, loud enough for me to hear. Each word struck like a lash. My hands trembled as I clutched the basket of bread, my legs heavy as though the earth itself resisted my steps. I tried to ignore them, to keep my eyes down, but the whispers chased me no matter where I turned. The cruelest wound came from those I once called friends. Girls I had played with as a child now looked away, their faces hard. Boys who had once shared stolen fruit in alleys now crossed the street to avoid me. Their silence screamed louder than any insult. Then, one afternoon, as I carried bread across the square, a girl I had once trusted looked me in the eye. I thought foolishly that she might smile, that she might be different. But her lips twisted into a sneer, and in a voice sharp enough for all to hear, she said, "You fooled him. You fooled us all." The bread slipped from my hands, tumbling into the dust. My throat locked. My heart screamed to defend myself, but no sound came. My silence betrayed me, and their judgment only grew. That night I crumbled. I curled into the corner of my room, muffling my sobs so my siblings wouldn't wake. They slept soundly, bellies full, faces peaceful. I couldn't let them know that outside our new home, the world was tearing us apart. But inside me, doubt gnawed like a rat. What if they were right? What if I had been greedy to accept his care? What if I had stolen a place that was never mine to take? The questions chewed at me until dawn. The old man noticed. One evening, as we sat by the fire, his frail hand reached for mine. His voice was weak, but it carried a weight that silenced the storm in me. "Do not carry their words," he said gently. "They only see what they cannot understand." Tears welled in my eyes. But what if they're right? What if I am selfish? His gaze softened, his lips trembling into a sad smile. "Selfishness is taking without giving. But you gave me life again. You gave my home laughter. You gave me hope. That is no trick. That is love." His words wrapped around me like a shield. For the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile peace return. But the peace did not last. The whispers in the market did not die. They grew louder, harsher, more dangerous. One day, when I walked with him by my side, the crowd fell silent, and then someone shouted from the back, "She's stolen everything from him." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. The crowd stirred, anger flickering in their eyes. My stomach knotted. This was no longer idle gossip. It was becoming something far more dangerous, and deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come. The next morning, as I stepped outside, a figure I had never seen before stood at our gate, his eyes burning with fury. The villagers gathered quickly, drawn by the promise of conflict. He pointed at me with a shaking hand and shouted, "She has no right here. She has tricked the Sultan, and I will not let her steal what is mine." My breath caught in my chest. This was no longer whispers in the dark. This was war, and it had come to our door. The market that once ignored me now watched me like a hunted animal. Every step I took, every coin I spent, I felt eyes drilling into my back. And then the words came, sharp, cruel, unstoppable. She bewitched him for wealth. My chest tightened, my breath caught. Another voice echoed, then another, until the air itself swarmed with venom. I turned slowly, hoping it was a lie, but what I saw froze me. The faces of people I had once trusted, now hard and cold, turned against me. At first I wanted to believe it was nothing, just idle talk, the kind of gossip that dies with the wind. But rumors are not weak, they are fire in dry grass. Once lit, they spread faster than truth can catch them. And soon, I could not step into the market without hearing my name tangled with malice. "She fooled him," a woman whispered near the spice stall. "She's clever, too clever," muttered a man weighing grain. "Greedy little orphan," another spat, loud enough to pierce my ears. Their voices wrapped around me like thorns, each word cutting deeper than the last. The betrayal that burned worst was not from strangers, but from old friends. The girl who once shared her scarf with me on freezing nights now crossed the street when she saw me. The boy who had carried buckets of water with me once now avoided my eyes as if I were a disease. People who once pitied me now despised me. Their silence, their turned backs, their whispered curses, it was louder than any shout. One afternoon, as I carried bread across the square, I saw a girl I had played with as a child. Hope flickered in me for a moment. Maybe she was different. Maybe she still believed in me. But as our eyes met, her lips curled into a sneer. "You fooled him. You fooled us all." The bread slipped from my hands, scattering into the dust. My throat closed, but no words came. The crowd stared, waiting for me to answer, but my silence screamed louder than denial. That night, I broke. I sat in the corner of my room, muffling my sobs while my siblings slept peacefully nearby. Their faces glowed with the peace of full bellies and warm blankets. I should have felt comforted. Instead, guilt wrapped around me like a noose. What if they were right? What if I had been selfish to accept his love? What if, in saving my siblings, I had betrayed my parents' memory? The questions gnawed at me endlessly. My chest felt tight, as if the walls themselves were closing in. I had survived hunger, cold, and loneliness. But this invisible war of whispers was breaking me. The old man noticed. One evening, as I sat by the fire, too tired to pretend anymore, he placed his frail hand on mine. His eyes, though dim with age, burned with clarity. "They call you greedy," he said quietly. "But selfishness takes without giving. You gave me family when I had none. You gave me life again. Kindness is not greed. It is a gift. And you gave it freely." Tears filled my eyes. His words were like water to my parched soul, washing away the poison of the rumors. For a brief moment, I believed him. For a brief moment, I felt safe again. But safety never lasts. The cruelty of the market deepened. Merchants doubled their prices when I approached, smirking as I handed over twice the coins. Some refused to touch the money from my hand, forcing me to drop it on their counters. Children mocked me openly, repeating the venom they heard at home. Every step through the market became a trial, every glance a silent accusation. Then came the stone. One morning, as I crossed the square, a small rock rolled to a stop at my feet. My stomach dropped. My sister clutched my hand tighter, her eyes wide with fear. Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and mocking, though no one claimed the throw. My cheeks burned. My hands trembled. And I realized it was no longer just whispers. It was open hate. Still, he defended me. When accusations rose in the square, the old man stood by my side. His frame was frail, but his voice was thunder. "You see greed because greed lives in your own hearts," he told them. "This girl gave when she had nothing. She is no thief. She is my daughter. My choice." His words silenced the crowd. But silence is not the same as trust. Their eyes still glared. Their whispers still lingered, feeding the fire of suspicion. And in my heart, I knew. The storm was only gathering strength. One evening, as the sun bled red over the rooftops, a stranger stepped forward from the crowd. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes sharp with ambition. The villagers parted for him, their murmurs swelling into a dangerous hum. He pointed directly at me and declared, "If she is truly his daughter, let her prove it, for I am his kin, and I demand his fortune." My breath stopped cold. The whispers had given birth to a rival, and he had come to claim war. The rival's voice cut through the marketplace like thunder rolling across the mountains. "I am his blood, and she is nothing but a thief." The words struck me harder than any blow. For a moment, the entire world tilted beneath my feet. People gasped, whispers rippled through the crowd, and dozens of eyes fixed on me as though I had been caught stealing bread with my own hands. My body froze, but inside my heart pounded with terror. He stepped closer, his eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and triumph. "You think she loves you?" he shouted at the Sultan, his finger stabbing the air toward me. "She bewitched you. She tricked you into signing away what belongs to your blood. I am your kin. By rights, your wealth is mine." The crowd murmured in agreement. Blood. That word carried weight in our world. People clung to it, believing it mattered more than loyalty, sacrifice, or love. And now, that word was being wielded like a weapon against me. I wanted to scream that I never asked for gold or riches, that all I had ever wanted was safety for my siblings. But my throat closed up. My lips trembled, but no sound came out. Beside me, the Sultan tried to stand tall, but his voice cracked under the pressure, his face pale with strain. "She is my daughter by choice," he declared. "Her love gave me life again. You, though of my blood, gave me nothing but absence." But the effort was too much. His hand clutched his chest, his knees buckled, and then, before anyone could stop him, he collapsed. Gasps exploded through the marketplace. Some people rushed forward, others stepped back as if illness could leap from him to them. My own cry tore from my throat as I fell to the ground beside him. "No, please, stay with me," I begged, shaking him gently. His eyelids fluttered, but his body trembled weakly, his breath coming in shallow bursts. "Call a healer," someone shouted. But most people only watched, curiosity stronger than compassion. With my siblings' help, I managed to get him back home, but the image of his collapse replayed in my mind again and again. The days that followed were the hardest I had ever lived. I nursed him day and night, refusing to leave his side. My siblings brought me bowls of water, small cloths to cool his forehead, and herbs that villagers reluctantly sold to us. His once powerful presence, the steady strength that had carried me through storms of rumors, now lay fragile in the bed. I spooned thin broth into his mouth when he was able to swallow. When his body burned with fever, I sat beside him, wiping sweat from his brow, whispering words of comfort, though fear tore at my insides. At night, when thunder rolled outside and my siblings slept, I held his hand in both of mine, listening to the uneven rhythm of his breath and praying it would not stop. I prayed like a child again, begging whatever force ruled the heavens not to take him away. And yet, even in his weakness, he tried to comfort me. One night, his fingers, frail but steady, gripped my wrist. His voice was barely more than a whisper, but his words cut deep into my heart. "You are the daughter I prayed for." Tears blurred my eyes instantly. I bent down, pressing his hand to my cheek. "Then don't leave me," I whispered. "Please, not now. We need you." His lips trembled into a faint smile. "I will fight. Because of you." Those words became the strength that kept me from breaking, but outside, the rival would not let us rest. Every few days, he returned to our gate, shouting, demanding the Sultan's fortune, threatening to drag us before the law. "You are not family," he roared at me. "You are nothing but a liar, stealing what is mine." Each time I faced him, though my knees trembled. I told him he would not break us, but when the door closed, I leaned against it, my heart pounding, fear gnawing at me like hunger. What if the law sided with him? What if the Sultan's name, his wealth, his protection, all vanished because of that man? And worst of all, what if the endless stress destroyed the fragile life still flickering in the man I called father? The Sultan, though weak, stood by me when he could. One evening, his voice strained but firm, he told me, "Wealth is nothing. Love is everything. That man may share my blood, but he never shared my life. You did. You gave me laughter, warmth, family. That is why you are my daughter." I sobbed quietly at his words, clutching his hand. But what if they take everything away? His eyes, dimmed by fever but still burning with fire, locked onto mine. "Then they will take only gold. They will never take you. Remember that." Through it all, my siblings clung to him as though their love could keep him alive. They sat by his bed, bringing him water, singing softly when the fever raged, resting their small heads against his arm as though to lend him their strength. He called them my little ones, blessing them with trembling hands, whispering prayers over their heads, even as his own voice faltered. In those quiet moments, we became more than just a family. We became a fortress. The world outside could rage, but inside those walls, our love was unshakable. And yet, I knew love could not stop time. His steps, when he had strength to walk, grew slower each day. His laughter, once steady and warm, came less often, faint and short-lived. Every morning, I woke with dread in my chest, fearing this would be the day he would not rise. Then came the night I had feared all along. The sky outside split with thunder, rain slashing hard against the roof. I sat by his bed, listening to the storm, when suddenly his breathing changed, shallow, broken, fading like a dying flame. My heart froze. I shook him gently, tears already spilling. His skin was cold, his lips pale, his eyes half closed. Lightning lit the room, and in that moment, I knew I might be losing him forever. The house had grown too quiet. Once, his voice had filled these walls with warmth, laughter, and gentle guidance. Now, even his footsteps were gone. Each morning, I walked into his room with dread clawing at my chest, praying I would find him sitting up, waiting with one of his wise smiles. Instead, I found him weaker than the day before, unable to rise, his breath shallow, his hands trembling like autumn leaves ready to fall. And though I gripped his hand tightly, whispering promises I could never break, I knew the truth. I was standing at the edge of the unthinkable, losing him forever. The Sultan's decline was slow, cruel, and relentless. The man who had once stood beside me in the marketplace, defending me against accusations with a voice like thunder, was now trapped in his bed, his strength drained. His breaths came unevenly, sometimes so faint I held mine just to hear his. Day and night, I refused to leave his side. I spooned broth to his lips, wiped his forehead when fever burned, and sang softly in the dim light to comfort him, as though he were the child, and I the parent. My siblings helped in every small way, fetching water, gathering herbs, holding his frail hands with tiny fingers. The home that had once been filled with his stories and riddles now carried only silence, broken by coughs and the fragile rhythm of his breathing. Even my siblings, once bursting with laughter, spoke in whispers, afraid that loud voices might steal what little strength he had left. One night, when the rain tapped against the windows and the fire burned low, he reached for my hand. His fingers were cold, his grip weak, but his eyes burned with a love that pierced through the shadows. "You gave me life again," he whispered, each word trembling but steady. "When I thought my days were empty, you came with nothing but water and kindness. You reminded me of what it means to be a father." Tears spilled down my face. "No," I choked out. "It was you. You saved us. You gave my siblings and me a future." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then perhaps we saved each other." His health declined further in the days that followed. By then, he could no longer rise from his bed. My siblings clung to him, climbing into his arms as if their small bodies could anchor him to this world. He kissed their foreheads with trembling lips, blessing them one by one. He called me close late one evening, his voice soft as the dying wind. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything," I whispered, my heart breaking. "Take care of them," he said, glancing at my siblings. "Protect them. Love them. That will be my gift to you, and your gift to them." I nodded, pressing his hand to my chest. "I promise. With all of me, I promise." That was the last promise he heard from me. On his final night, the storm outside raged. Lightning slashed across the sky, thunder shook the walls, and rain poured so heavily it sounded as though the heavens themselves were mourning. Inside, the fire burned low, casting long, trembling shadows across the room. He opened his eyes for the last time. With his final strength, he pressed my hand gently and whispered, "You are the daughter I prayed for." Then, with a peaceful sigh, he closed his eyes forever. His chest stilled. His hand slipped from mine. I screamed silently, my tears spilling hot and endless. My siblings clung to me, sobbing, their small voices breaking the heavy silence of the room. For a long time, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe he was gone. In the days that followed, grief wrapped around us like chains. But along with grief came revelation. Lawyers arrived with papers he had signed long before. Everything, his home, his savings, his lands, was left to us. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, but out of love, out of choice. I became the legal guardian of my siblings, no longer only their sister but their protector in every sense. The burden that had once felt impossible now came with the strength he had left in me. And with that strength, I began to lead us forward. The whispers in the marketplace eventually faded. Some villagers avoided my eyes still, others came to me with apologies heavy with guilt. But I had no need for their validation anymore. He had given me something greater than their approval. He had given me family, courage, and legacy. I began to live by his lessons. I gave bread to the hungry, blankets to the cold, and kindness to those who least expected it. Each time I gave, I felt him beside me, smiling from the shadows of memory. One night, as my siblings and I sat by the fire, I told them the story of how everything began, not a fairy tale, but the truth. How I had once offered a frail old man nothing but a jar of water. How that smallest kindness had opened the door to the greatest gift we had ever known. They listened with wide eyes, their hands clutching mine. And I realized I had thought I gave him water, but in truth, he had given me family. His story does not end with his death. It begins with his legacy. For he taught me that even the smallest kindness carries the power to change destinies. A sip of water, a moment of compassion. These can open doors we never dreamed existed. I carry his gift within me, and through it, I lead my siblings forward. His final lesson burns in my heart. The smallest act of kindness can open the door to the greatest destiny. Did this story make you feel something deep inside? Then don't just keep it to yourself. Like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe now, because the next story might be the one that changes your destiny. And in the comments, tell me, do you believe a small act of kindness can truly change a life? Your answer could be the spark someone else is waiting for.